My name is Caleb Hayes, and I live in Clearwater Creek, Ohio. It's the kind of small town where you can't go to the grocery store without running into at least 3 people you know, and the biggest news is usually about the high school football team. I'm 34 and I've lived here my whole life. I work at Clearwater Components, a local company that makes small parts for bigger machines. It's not exciting work. I sit in a cubicle all day, staring at spreadsheets and making sure numbers line up. My world is one of order and predictability, and honestly, that's how I like it. The hum of the office air conditioner, the rhythmic click of my keyboard, the quiet murmur of my coworkers, it's a peaceful, if a little boring, existence. The highlight of my day, my little bubble of personal space in the sea of cubicles, was my pair of headphones. They weren't just any headphones. They were a gift from my dad before he passed away. They were expensive, a really nice pair of noise-canceling ones that rhymed with Poe's quiet comfort. Over the years, I put them through a lot. I'm not the most graceful person, so they'd been dropped, sat on, even knocked into a puddle once. They were survivors. The power and volume buttons had long since given up, meaning if they had a charge they were on, and they were always on at maximum volume. The right earpiece was held together with a strip of bright blue duct tape that I'd carefully applied. They looked like they'd been through a war, but they were mine. They were my sanctuary. When I put them on, the drone of the office disappeared, replaced by my favorite podcasts or the classic rock my dad and I used to listen to. They were more than just electronics. They were a connection to him, a beat-up, duct-taped symbol of comfort. My life in that cubicle was manageable because of those headphones. But then Brenda happened. Brenda was a coworker in my department. To put it nicely, she was a professional slacker. She was the kind of person who spent more time on personal calls than on her actual work, who always had a dramatic story for why her reports were late, and who had a knack for making her responsibilities someone else's problem, usually mine. She had this loud, grating laugh that could cut through concrete, and a sense of entitlement that was just staggering. We all had to pull extra weight to make up for her, and management never seemed to notice or care. She was a constant, low-level source of irritation for the entire department. One Tuesday afternoon, my supervisor, Mark, called me into his office for an urgent issue with some shipping invoices. It felt a little strange, but I left my headphones charging at my desk and went to see what he needed. We spent 20 minutes sorting out a problem that turned out to be a simple typo. When I got back to my cubicle, my stomach dropped. My headphones were gone. The charging cable was still there, plugged into my computer, but the headphones themselves had vanished. I felt a hot flash of panic. I looked under my desk, behind my monitor, through my drawers, nothing. I started asking around. "Hey, did anyone see my headphones, the old blue ones with the duct tape?" I asked Sarah from the next cubicle. She just shook her head, looking sympathetic. I asked Kevin from across the aisle. Nothing. I even swallowed my pride and walked over to Brenda's desk. "Brenda, you didn't happen to see my headphones, did you?" She looked up from her phone, a blank expression on her face. "Headphones? Nope, haven't seen them. You should be more careful with your stuff, Caleb." The way she said it felt like a little jab, but I couldn't prove anything. The headphones were just gone. I reported it to Mark, who said he'd look into it, which I knew was code for "I'm not going to do anything." The rest of the week was miserable. The office felt 10 times louder without my sonic shield. Every phone call, every loud conversation, every time Brenda laughed her horrible laugh, it felt like it was drilling directly into my brain. I felt exposed and agitated. More than that, I felt a deep sense of loss. It was like a piece of my dad had been stolen from me. The problem wasn't just the noise, it was the violation. Someone had come into my personal space, my little sanctuary, and taken something that meant the world to me. And I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who it was. The next few months were a slow grind. I bought a cheap pair of $20 earbuds, but they were terrible. The sound was tinny and they did nothing to block out the office noise. I mostly gave up, resigning myself to the constant drone of Clearwater Components. I tried to forget about my old headphones, but every time I saw that lonely charging cable on my desk, I'd feel a fresh pang of anger and sadness. Brenda, meanwhile, seemed to be thriving. She got praised in a team meeting for a project that I had secretly finished for her after she abandoned it. She would take 2-hour lunches and come back smelling like she'd been shopping. My resentment simmered, a low heat under the surface of my calm, quiet exterior. The problem was I had no proof. It was my word against hers, and she was a master manipulator. My world, once so ordered and predictable, now had this jagged hole in it, a constant reminder of injustice. Then one Saturday, everything changed. I was at Miller's Market, our local grocery store, just trying to get my weekly shopping done. I was in the produce aisle trying to decide if I was ambitious enough to cook with fresh asparagus when I saw her. It was Brenda, across the way in the cereal aisle. And she was wearing my headphones. There was no mistaking them. The faded blue color, the scuffs on the side, and most damning of all, the bright blue strip of duct tape holding the right side together. It was them. She was bopping her head back and forth, completely lost in whatever she was listening to. I just stood there frozen with a bag of potatoes in my hand. A wave of ice-cold fury washed over me. It wasn't a hot, explosive anger, but something colder and heavier. It was the certainty. For months, it had just been a suspicion, a gut feeling. Now it was a fact. She stole them. She stole my dad's headphones and was flaunting them in the middle of the cereal aisle. I watched her for a moment longer, my knuckles white on the potato bag. She had no idea I was there. She was in her own little world, a world she had stolen from me. I thought about marching over there and confronting her, ripping them off her head. But what would that accomplish? She'd deny it, call me crazy, make a scene. In a town like Clearwater Creek, a public scene at Miller's Market would be the talk of the town for weeks. No, that wasn't the way. I turned and walked away, my heart hammering against my ribs. The problem had a face now, and I had proof. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The following Monday, I decided I had to try the direct approach. I couldn't let it go. I spent the weekend stewing, my anger hardening into resolve. I rehearsed what I would say over and over. I had to be calm, rational, and non-accusatory. I waited until mid-morning when Brenda was at her desk, scrolling through her phone as usual. I walked over, my hands sweating. "Hey Brenda," I started, my voice sounding a little shaky. "Quick question for you. I saw you at Miller's on Saturday. Those headphones you were wearing, they looked really familiar." I tried to keep my tone light, casual. She looked up at me, a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise, fear, before her mask of indifference snapped back into place. "Oh, these," she said, gesturing to the headphones that were now sitting on her desk. "My headphones. Yeah, they're great. I've had them for ages." Her lie was so blatant, so effortless, it took my breath away. "Really?" I pushed a little more firmly this time, "because they look exactly like the pair that went missing from my desk a few months ago, right down to the blue duct tape." I pointed at the tape. Her eyes narrowed. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Look, Caleb," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I don't know what you're implying, but these are my headphones. Maybe you should spend less time worrying about my stuff and more time getting your reports done on time." She was gaslighting me, turning it around, making me the bad guy. She was implying I was a slacker, the very thing she was famous for. I stood there, speechless. The entire exchange had taken less than a minute, but I felt like I had run a marathon. I was humiliated. A few people in nearby cubicles had looked up, their curiosity piqued. I could feel their eyes on me as I turned and walked back to my desk, my face burning with shame. My attempt to solve the problem had failed spectacularly. Not only did I not get my headphones back, but I had made the situation infinitely worse. Brenda was now on high alert. She knew that I knew. And instead of being cautious, she became brazen. It was like my failed confrontation had emboldened her. She started wearing the headphones at the office, not to listen to music, but as a statement. She draped them around her neck like a trophy. Sometimes she walked past my desk and accidentally dropped them right in front of me, then scooped them up with a smug little smile. "Whoops, clumsy me," she'd say, locking eyes with me for a second too long. It was a daily, silent torment. Each time I saw them, it was a fresh reminder of the theft, of my powerlessness, of her victory over me. The original problem had grown from a simple theft into a psychological war. She was rubbing my face in it, and there was nothing I could do. My work started to suffer. I was distracted, irritable. The quiet peace of my cubicle was gone, replaced by a constant simmering rage. I started making small mistakes in my spreadsheets, something I never did before. Mark even called me in to ask if everything was okay. I just mumbled something about being tired. How could I explain that I was being slowly driven mad by a pair of stolen headphones? Things reached their absolute lowest point about a month later. The company had just hired a new director for our entire division, a guy named Mr. Sterling from corporate headquarters. It was a huge deal. He was coming to our little Clearwater Creek office to meet everyone. A big department-wide meeting was scheduled. The pressure was on to make a good impression. The day before the meeting, Brenda did what Brenda does best. She completely botched a massive, time-sensitive project, a quarterly analysis that was crucial for the new director's visit. She handed in a mess of incorrect data and nonsensical charts, then conveniently left an hour early, complaining of a migraine. Mark came to me in a panic. "Caleb, I need your help. This is a disaster. Sterling is going to see this tomorrow." So I stayed. I stayed late into the night, fueled by lukewarm coffee from the vending machine and pure, unadulterated spite. I untangled her mess, corrected the data, rebuilt the charts, and made the report perfect. It was almost midnight when I finally finished. As I packed up my bag, exhausted and bleary-eyed, I felt a profound sense of defeat. Here I was, fixing her mistakes, making her look good, while she was probably at home, sleeping soundly, my stolen headphones sitting on her nightstand. I felt utterly and completely trapped. All my hard work, my dedication, my quiet competence, it meant nothing. She could lie, cheat, and steal and not only get away with it, but seemingly be rewarded for it. As I walked out to the empty parking lot, the cold Ohio air hitting my face, I knew something had to give. I couldn't go on like this. The direct approach had failed. Ignoring it was impossible. The system that was supposed to protect people like me had failed. That's when the idea started to form. It wasn't a noble thought. It was dark and angry and born of pure desperation. If I couldn't get justice the right way, maybe I had to get it my own way. The department meeting with the new director was tomorrow, and Brenda would, without a doubt, bring her trophy. The night before the big meeting, I didn't sleep much. I sat in front of my computer, not working but plotting. My plan was risky, childish even, but it was all I had left. I remembered the key flaw of my old headphones: no volume control, and if they were on at full blast. I also remembered Brenda's habit. She always took her phone with her, but often left her purse or bag under her chair. If the headphones were in her bag and she walked far enough away, her phone's Bluetooth connection would drop. And my phone might still have the headphones listed in its Bluetooth memory. It was a long shot, but it was a shot. I opened my phone's settings and scrolled through the list of previously connected devices. My heart leaped. There it was, QC35II. I hadn't deleted it. I had been so upset I had completely forgot. The first piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. Now for the second piece, the payload. I couldn't just play music. That would be weird, but not devastating. I needed something that would cause maximum, undeniable, career-ending humiliation. I went online and started searching for sound files. I typed in things like obnoxious sounds and annoying audio clips. After about an hour of searching the weirder corners of the internet, I found it. It was perfect. It was a sound file from some bizarre low-budget skit. It started with loud, wet, slapping sounds, like someone clapping with hands covered in lotion. Then a woman's voice, loud and aggressive, started yelling things that were so vulgar and absurd they were almost comical. She was shouting instructions to a partner, using the most graphic language imaginable, talking about her hoo-ha and demanding he look in her mouth while making these awful plopping noises. It was so over the top and shocking that it was guaranteed to cause chaos. I downloaded the file and renamed it Q3 Audio Report, MP3, just in case anyone ever saw my phone screen. I felt a little sick to my stomach, but also a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the final, desperate attempt. The next morning I went to work dressed in my nicest shirt. I wanted to look like a model employee when the world came crashing down around Brenda. The air in the office was thick with anticipation. Everyone was nervous about meeting the new director, Mr. Sterling. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the main conference room. I saw Brenda walk in looking smug as always. And sure enough, draped around her neck were my headphones. She tucked them into her large handbag as she sat down. I chose a seat a few rows behind her, giving myself a clear line of sight. My heart felt like a drum against my ribs. The conference room filled up. Mr. Sterling entered. He was a tall, serious-looking man in an expensive suit. He started his speech talking about the company's vision about integrity, professionalism, and teamwork. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. I kept my eyes on Brenda. I watched her fidget. I watched her check her phone. Then it happened, just like I predicted. About 15 minutes into the speech, Brenda stood up and walked to the back of the room to get a cup of coffee. She left her handbag on the floor right under her chair. Her phone was in her hand. She was at least 30 feet away. This was my chance. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate my phone. I slid it out of my pocket, keeping it low, below the level of the table. I opened my Bluetooth settings. I took a deep breath and tapped on QC35II. I watched the little spinning icon for what felt like an eternity. Then the word appeared, connected. A jolt went through me. It worked. Phase 1 was complete. I navigated to my music player, found the file named Q3 Audio Report MP3, and cranked the media volume on my phone all the way to the top. I took one last look at Brenda, who was chatting with someone by the coffee pot, completely oblivious. I looked at Mr. Sterling, who was now talking about fourth quarter projections. I closed my eyes for a second, said a silent goodbye to my quiet, predictable life, and pressed play. For a split second, nothing happened. Then a deafeningly loud plop sound erupted from under Brenda's empty chair. It was so loud and sudden that Mr. Sterling stopped talking mid-sentence. Every head in the room whipped around, trying to find the source of the noise. Plop, plop, slap, the grotesque sounds filled the silent conference room. Then the voice started, screaming from the tiny speakers of my old headphones, blasting at maximum volume from inside Brenda's handbag. Bust MYWHOHA, bust IT harder. The entire room froze in stunned silence. People's jaws were literally hanging open. Mr. Sterling's face was a mask of pure disbelief. Brenda at the back of the room turned pale. The color drained from her face as she realized the horrifying sounds were coming from her bag. Come on, look in my mouth. Are you listening? I said, look in my mouth. The voice from the headphones shrieked, accompanied by more wet, plopping sounds. Brenda started moving, a panicked, clumsy scramble back to her chair. She dove for her bag, her face a mess of terror and humiliation. She ripped the headphones out, but she couldn't turn them off. She fumbled with the non-existent power button. She mashed the broken volume controls. Nothing worked. The vulgar audio just kept blasting, echoing through the mortified silence of the room. The entire department, all our supervisors, and the new director of the division were staring at her, their expressions a mix of horror, confusion, and for a few people in the back, barely suppressed laughter. It was a train wreck in slow motion. Finally, she broke. With a strangled sob, she clutched the still blasting headphones, grabbed her bag, and fled the room, running down the hall as the sound of the vulgar lady demanding someone inspect her mouth faded into the distance. The room was left in a state of absolute shock. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. As everyone was still processing what had just happened, I discreetly took out my phone. I turned the volume all the way down, disconnected the Bluetooth, and then for good measure I went into my settings and tapped forget this device. The evidence was gone. My part in the chaos was erased. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat, looking deeply unsettled. Well, he said, let's take a 15-minute break. The meeting was over. My revenge was complete. The aftermath was even better than I could have imagined. We all shuffled back to our desks in a state of daze. An hour passed, then two. Brenda never came back. Just after lunch, we all got an email from Human Resources. It was a friendly reminder of the company's administrative regulation regarding the use of personal electronic devices on company property, with a special, newly added emphasis that pornographic material of any kind is strictly prohibited. The timing wasn't exactly subtle. The next day, Brenda called in sick. Then she called in sick for the rest of the week. The rumor mill went into overdrive, but everyone who was in that room knew the truth. We had to pick up her slack, but nobody complained. The office was quieter, more peaceful. It was like a poison had been drained from the environment. About 2 weeks later, the news became official. Brenda was no longer employed by Clearwater Components. She had been given the choice to resign or be fired, and she chose to resign. I never saw her again. Life at the office slowly returned to a new normal. Better normal. With Brenda gone, the whole department's morale lifted. People were more collaborative, less stressed. Mr. Sterling, the new director, even ended up being a pretty good guy, though I always avoided making direct eye contact with him just in case. I was still quiet Caleb from the cubicle, but something inside me had shifted. I had faced a bully and injustice, and I had fought back on my own terms. I had found a strength I didn't know I possessed. A few months went by. One afternoon, I was cleaning out some old stuff from my desk drawers when I found a forgotten USB drive. Curious, I plugged it into my computer. It was a backup I had made years ago. I clicked through old folders of documents and photos, and then I found it. In a folder labeled Voice Memos, there was a file named for Caleb. My heart skipped a beat. I put on my cheap, tinny earbuds and pressed play. It was my dad's voice. A recording he must have left for me that I never knew existed. "Hey kiddo," his voice said, warm and familiar, crackling slightly. "Just wanted to say I'm proud of you. You're a good man, Caleb. Keep working hard. Love you." Tears welled up in my eyes. I sat there in my quiet cubicle listening to his voice on a loop. The headphones were gone forever, and I was okay with that. I realized Brenda hadn't just stolen a piece of electronics from me. She had stolen my peace. She had stolen my little monument to my father's memory and desecrated it. My revenge wasn't just about a pair of headphones. It was about reclaiming that peace. It was for my dad, and in the quiet hum of the office, for the first time in a long time, I finally felt at peace.